right, welcome back once again, everybody. I'm Don Seifert. It's the Dr. Treefruit and Don podcast. It is July 24th. I'm here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hi.
Dr. Greg Krawcheck. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
And Dr. Sean Kumar.
Hello, everyone.
Greg, since you need to leave a little early, why don't you get us started?
Thank you, Don. Hello, everyone. Entomology update for late July. Well, what is happening right now? This is really a time when we really have to think again about codling moth and oriental fruit moth if they are still present in the orchards. The reason why the if is very important here is if we did a good job controlling the first generation of codling moth or first and second generation of oriental fruit moth, we should not have a problem right now. And traps, pheromone traps in the orchard should have a very low numbers, and then your pesticide input might be minimal or very reduced to maybe some soft product like codling moth granulosis virus. However, if you have traps and your number are increasing in the traps, then this is the time when you really have to pay very, very close attention to codling moth. The big reason is that anything that will fly right now, that will lay eggs, and the larvae will come out of those eggs, this is the stuff that people will be finding during the harvest in fruit. And this is for both oriental fruit moth for peaches and apples, and codling moth for apples only. So again, check the traps and then based on it, decide what you gonna do. If you need to use insecticides to control codling moth, your choices are limited to use the stuff or use the product with the mode of action that you did not use for the first generation. So if you were using Altacor, Exirel, Verdeplem, Voliam, Besiege to control codling moth for the first generation, you cannot use any one of those products for the second generation. Also be aware that Altacor right now has a generic version with the name Shizi or Shinzi, and this is still Altacor. This is still the same active ingredient. So this one belongs to the same diamide group. So if you use any of the diamides earlier on, right now, your options for the controlling second generation and potential third generation are basically delegate and or codling moth granulosis virus. The products for the codling moth granulosis virus are Madex, Sidex, and Virosoft. Madex and Virosoft should help you also with oriental fruit moth. However, if you're gonna go the soft route, and both of them, Madex, Sidex, and Virosoft register for organic growers as well, but if you're gonna go this route, you have to make sure that your applications are being done every 7 days. With the hot weather, with the UV sun, you can't skip the application or say, oh, I will do it in 10 days. The issue is the Virosoft, the codling moth granulosis virus is deactivated by the UV light. And doesn't matter if you use 2 ounces, 4 ounces, or half ounces, after 7 days, this product is not active anymore. So this is something very important. If you go with delegate, you have windows of probably 14 days when if you do the complete spray, you are covered. If you go with the half spray, the same deal. 14 days residual for delegate is good enough. If you use delegate earlier on, then you can go with those diamides. Just be careful because some of the diamides especially the mixtures, they have the pyrethroids Actara in them, and then Actara have 35 days PHIs. So be careful about this. Another thing about codling MOF is that we start for the second generation. The first generation was very extended. So basically from now on, you need to have a coverage on your fruit continuously until the end of the flight. Again, in the past, we would say mid-September, flight is done. The experience from 2024 tells us that they actually were flying last year until early October. And as long as they fly, as long as we see them in the traps, that's when they lay eggs, and those eggs will still hatch, and the larva will still go into fruit and will be harvested. So this is why we really have to be very, very vigilant if we don't want to end up with this unpleasant surprise of having worms in the fruit. So this is the big thing. Smaller thing, although for some growers might be as big as, is the brown marmorated stingbug. We're getting to the point that stingbug will start moving to the orchards. Up to now, most of the stinkbugs were basically feeding wherever they were. They could feed on almost any host, and feeding on everything, they had no reason to move to the orchards. Now, orchards will become a much more attractive food source for the stinkbugs, and they will start moving. If you don't have traps for the stinkbug yet, please put them out now. You put them out, put them in the areas where you expect the stinkbug might be coming from. So if your orchard bordering, a woods, or bordering a soybean field, or bordering a cornfield, that's where your trap should be. Again, trap will not prevent the injury, but trap will tell you if stinkbugs are coming and if you need to spray against stinkbug. The chance is 60% of the orchards do not need to be sprayed against stinkbug because they will never get into them. However, you have to make sure, and finding them by visual observation is much more difficult than just go and check the trap and see that yes, they are coming. If they start coming, your insecticide options are also limited. None of the products I mentioned for the codling moth will help with the stingbug. So stingbug sprays have to be a completely separate issue. You can spray them together, but this is a different issue. Your best products to control stingbugs are either pyrethroids, such as danitol or bifenture, or neonicotinoids, such as Belay, Asail, or Admire Pro. Anything you use from neonicotinoids, you have to go with the highest label rate because that's the only rate that will work. If you worry about stink bugs, and I see actually native stink bugs on peaches right now, peaches and nectarines, you have a legal application of scorpion or venom that are also neonicotinoids. They are not registered for using on apples, but they are registered for use on stone fruit, peaches and nectarines. And you can spray them and they have only 3 days PHI. So if you worry about stink bugs on your stone fruit, venom and scorpion are your good option, plus the other product that I mentioned earlier. One thing about bifenture. This is a pyrethroid. Bifenture products, they contain active ingredients bifenthrin. The product name will be bifenture or brigade, and they have 14 days PHI. But the most important part about all those products containing bifenthrin is they have a long residual activity. I know growers who basically, and this is taking into account your pre-harvest interval, when you're gonna harvest Gala, and Gala might be coming in 3 weeks. I mean, who knows exactly when, or Premier Honeycrisp, it might be already too late to play with the Brigade or Biventure. But for your later maturing cultivars, then you have two applications of per season, but those applications have to be spread at least 30 days apart. So you cannot go now and 2 weeks later go again with any products containing bifenthrin, Brigade or Biventure. So you do the spray whenever you start seeing movement of stingback to the orchard. Remember 14 days PHI, and then you can do it again later on, let's say in beginning of September, the second application, and this should carry you through most of September. Again, of course, efficacy is the best within the first 2 weeks. However, bifenthrin, the active has a very long residual activity, and it will help you longer than 14 days. Again, stingback issue is localized. Not everyone needs it. If you know you will need it because you have traps or you have previous experience, which again, not always may carry from year to year because stingbacks are moving around. They are not resident pests. Codling moth is resident, oriental fruit moth is resident, plum curculio is resident. Stinkbugs can move in, move out. You might have them very bad 1 year, and you might not see a single one. Well, a single one is overstatement, but you might see a very low next year. That's why traps really tell you if you need to do something or not. Uh, So this is another, and then the last thing I want to mention, and I just found out it today from our farm manager that the next generation of San Jose scale is actually being detected in the traps. If you had a problem with San Jose scale and you already might see some injuries from the first summer generation, this might be the time to go again if you need to go against San Jose scale, or you didn't do anything, but now you see some initial injuries that it might be time to control them. If you don't control them, you might end up with the very bad looking fruit. I mean, they're still eatable, but they will have a lot of those red dots, well, black dots surrounded by the red surrounding on the apples. So this is something to remember. If you need to control San Jose scale, Centaur, Esteem, or Movento, but Centaur and Esteem probably a better option at this time to control. The reason why Movento might not be the best is that Movento is a translaminar activity, and with most of the growth, most of the foliage already hardened, it might be difficult to actually get it to the place where it should be. So Centaur or Steam would be the best choices to control San Jose scale at this time. So this will be my update for right now. We might, in 2 weeks, whenever our next call, we'll see how it goes. We might know more about stink bugs, movement, and so on. But again, this is the time to start looking for it. So codling moth need to be controlled now. Brown marmorated stink bug, look for it. And San Jose scale, look for it. If you don't have traps, check if you have fruit. We know that they're flying right now, the next generation. So they will be out and causing more injuries within the next few days because we're talking 10 to 14 days after start catching them in the traps. And they're flying at least for a week, at least in Biglerville, but this might be different in different orchards. So with this, that's all for today. Thank you. Any
Awesome.
questions?
No, thanks, Greg. That was really comprehensive. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Um, Dr. Peter.
Okay. So, as we are nearing harvest, we're in the thick of peach harvest and apples are going to be starting soon. So there's just a handful of things I want to be on people's radars and in their consciousness. First, with the peaches, just be mindful of your pre-harvest brown rot sprays. Peaches are going to be harvested depending on variety, through probably early September. So make sure you are rotating your fungicides by frac group for practice fungicide resistance management. And also be mindful of how many inches or how much rain falls in between your pre-harvest brown rot sprays. I started my pre-harvest brown rot sprays for my research orchard in the beginning of July, and I just so happen to be spraying every week. And that sort of is not sort of, it is different than what the recommendation is as far as like 18 to 21 or 21 to 18 days pre-harvest, 11 to 9 days, 3 to 1. I made the judgment call for my research orchards. Like, it's been raining so much. I am just going to be kind of following a weekly spray. And I'm putting on my last spray today to harvest my peaches on Monday. But last week we had almost it was well over 2.5 inches of rain since my last spray. So even if I were a commercial grower, growing commercially, I would be putting on another spray no matter what, just because of how much rain has fallen. So really be mindful of the weather in your area. Each area is different. Even with Adams County, it is feast or famine depending on where the rain is falling. So just really be mindful of how much rain is falling, how old is that fungicide spray on your peaches, because brown rot, this is a good brown rot year. And so I've already seen a bit of brown rot even at Freck among our various peach orchards, peach and nectarine orchards. Okay, so moving on to apples. Bitter rot is very much alive and well in orchards. I've seen bitter rot since late June. And so my recommendation for folks right now is scout and drop the fruit to the ground to limit spread of those spores that are active on those actively rotting fruit, because I was doing a fruit rating and I saw plenty of spores on the surface of those lesions out there. So the idea is that you can't stop what's already started, but you can prevent those spores from causing infection to clean looking fruit that's out there. So I'd recommend folks, it's going to probably, take some time, but it's worth going out there scouting, especially your problematic blocks. I'm talking about Honeycrisp, Premier Honeycrisp, anything with a Honeycrisp parent, even like Evercrisp, Empire susceptible, John Gold susceptible. So go out there and drop the fruit to the ground. The fruit will rot, yeasts will take over, and bitter rot won't be a problem. So that is my recommendation for dealing with active rot right now. As far as protection goes, you are limited based on when you are harvesting your fruit. So, for instance, Premier, your options are Maravon, which is a 0-day PHI, and that's probably it, because the other two, Flynn Extra and Luna Sensation, have a 14-day PHI. So unless you are planning on harvesting your premieres 2 weeks from today or 2 weeks from Friday, you might be outside of that pre-harvest interval. So Maravon is your best bet right now, especially if you're planning on holding on to those Honeycrisp or Premier Honeycrisp for any period of time. So and speaking of rots and Maravon and other fungicide sprays, this is going to be the first of many public service announcements that I will be making over the next couple weeks and next couple months to remind people to not stop spraying your apples with your last sprays in August. I have seen spray records of where there have been problems and the last spray was late August, yet they were still harvesting well into September, well into October. Lots of problems can occur when you stop your spraying. First of all, diseases aren't going to stop. Pathogens are still quite active out there. So please be mindful of those later varieties. Fuji, Pink Lady, Granny Smith, anything that's going to be harvested in late September and into October, maybe even early November. Be mindful of those late season cultivars and keeping them protected through the whole way. Don't let your foot off the gas. So, and I typically recommend Maravon because that has been our strongest product right now with regards to covering a lot of diseases. But Luna Sensation and Flynn Extra are also excellent products as well. But you have to be mindful that the same fungicides, the same frac groups in Luna Sensation is in Maravon. Also be mindful of what frac 7s you applied early in the season based on the label and the number of applications of frac 7s and 11s that you can apply. So that's a lot to juggle in your head, but something you got to be mindful of. For those late varieties, you can still use Omega. Omega is a 28-day PHI. Use it at the highest rate. Tank mix it with Captan. Use it. That is still a viable option to use right now for those late varieties. So as far as limiting those frac 7s and frac 11s. As far as another thing to emphasize to folks, because this was a good scab year for us. I've seen quite a bit of apple scab just in my own untreated research areas. An issue that occurred this year that caught me off guard because I've never really seen it before, but I know it exists, is storage scab. Storage scab is apple scab that pops up in storage, hence the name storage scab. And it's these, and it can be really devastating for a bin of apples. They'll go in clean, yet this will pop up in storage and completely nullify, negate that bin of apples. So this is another reason to also not let your foot off the gas for those later season varieties, especially if it's raining so much. And I know it's a lot to juggle with regards to harvest and spraying triage as far as the most problematic areas that you know that you've had issues with. I guess start from there. Focus your energies as far as keeping those areas protected. So that's just a little public service announcement for storage scab. You will be hearing about this during the winter meetings because this has been pretty problematic across the state. This isn't an isolated incident in one area. This is across the state. So this is something we are definitely going to be revisiting and kind of refreshing in our minds as far as going back to apple scab because I've learned a few new things about apple scab that I wasn't aware of, especially in relation to storage scab. So I definitely want to be passing on that information and those nuggets of wisdom so we don't have another year like this year with regards to apples coming out of storage. It was actually 2024 was a problematic year, but I have a feeling 2025 is not going to be any different, depending on how the fall or late summer shakes out with tropical storms and hurricanes and prolonged wet periods and issues like that. And the other thing that I just want to mention is Marsanina blotch. Marsanina blotch is definitely very much out there. We had great conditions for it. If you have it in your orchard, you will know it based on the leaves falling off. Varieties, definitely susceptibility. It is across the board as far as cultivars being vulnerable. Most cultivars are vulnerable. Some are a little more durable than others. So if you see leaves that are starting to yellow, and they've got dark blotches on them and those leaves are falling off, that's most likely Marsanina. I've seen Marsanina in my own orchard since mid-June, mid to late June, which was very early. But looking back at the weather, this was an excellent year for Marsanina. We had ideal conditions during petal fall, and it was very wet. We just had the perfect storm for Marsanina this year. So, folks, I just want you to be mindful of that. And again, another reason not to let your foot off the gas pedal with regards to your fungicide sprays, because once you have Marsanina, you're dealing with it the rest of the season. So those are the broad brushstrokes of the highlights that I wanted to mention for folks to be mindful of. So my take-home messages are be mindful how much rain's falling in between your fungicide spray, especially for brown rot. And for apples, if you are still harvesting varieties in September and October and early in November, you should still be spraying your fungicides to keep those fruit protected. Your packers will thank you profusely for that. Trust me, because that's how I find out when there are problems. Is I usually don't hear it right from the grower. I hear it from the packer. So the packers will be greatly, greatly appreciative by you continuing your fungicide sprays. For the rest of the season. So that's it, Don. Any questions?
No, it's pretty straightforward, as much as it's not straightforward to an extent. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
How
but
much rain has been falling in your area over like we got a deluge last week. And
uh,
I think you guys did too.
yeah, I was gonna say this week has been dry,
Yeah,
but
so
last
far.
week was yeah. We'll put a pin on that. But yeah, no, last week was incredibly wet. Um, I'd have to look at the weather station to see exactly how much fell, but yeah, we got quite a bit. I was dealing with like downed branches.
Oh goodness.
I was gonna say things came down on power lines, like all sorts of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of rain is falling across the state. So it's. And another thing is that be mindful of how old is that spray when that rain fell. So if it's a week old, you really definitely need to get out there sooner rather than later, especially if there's a rain event coming. But like for instance, like for me, I had sprays go on last Wednesday and it rained then about 2 inches, but I wasn't too worried because my sprays were fresh. So I was like, well, I can wait a few days because I don't think I still have protection out there despite 2 inches falling. It dried, and there's been research that has shown that even after 2 inches with a freshly applied fungicide spray, you still have activity. So it's something just to remind people is how old is that spray? How old is that fungicide on the fruit when that rain falls? So,
I'll add that this is a message that I got from New Jersey, and this is kind of relevant to you. It might be more relevant to Sean, technically. But it was like marginal dieback on some leaves. Um, Now, this is
is
an
it Gala
organic.
by chance?
No, it's across varieties. Now,
Okay.
they do have it on mulch, black plastic mulch, because it's an organic block for them. And what I assume is that it's heat stress, heat dieback, right around the leaf margins. Um, but if you're not looking for it, it does look like disease symptoms. Um,
And that
Especially
has
with like some of
been.
the wilting and some of the
Mhm.
other things that it's doing on top of like the blackened edges there. So
I've heard reports of that like in Michigan, and I've heard reports of that in Virginia. So I think it might be more heat because it doesn't look like a disease. It almost looks like a nutrient deficiency based on the pattern of the browning and chlorosis. Sean might have more information to provide, but this is the fact that we're seeing this widespread. I bet it is more heat, more
yeah, the
environmental.
mulch especially made me say it's almost certainly heat
Yeah,
dieback.
cooking.
It got really hot and it can be 20, 30 degrees hotter on black plastic mulch.
Mm.
Having grown watermelons, I know that can be 20, 30 degrees hotter on black plastic mulch. Um, but it was just something that I figured I'd mention in case someone is like, "Oh, I got some
Yeah.
random disease on the leaf
I
mark,"
don't think it's a
but
disease
it's not.
based on the pattern. I don't think because the trees are coming back because this one grower they saw issues with it last year. Trees came back fine. It's happening again. I don't know if it's a more of a vulnerable variety, but it's this is definitely this that type of symptoms is there's been lots of reports and
Yeah.
lots of
They're keeping them
speculation
watered.
as far as what's going on.
They're keeping them watered, so I'm not that worried about them, but
Hmm.
they're young, right? They're very young. It's very tender, so it makes sense to me. But anyway, I figured I'd throw that one out there since it's a good transition between
Yeah.
you and
Yeah, for
Dr.
sure.
Kumar. So, hey, Sean,
Hey Don, how are you doing?
good. You ready to rock and roll?
Yeah.
Cool. Then let's get to it.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that we are nearing the time where we generally do our regular soil and leaf testing, either end of July, early August, up to mid-August, up to the end of August as well. You could potentially do your soil and leaf testing. And so I know that soil testing is pretty standard for a lot of folks, where you usually do soil testing every year. And sometimes you have the companies that come and do the soil testing for you. Like they collect samples and then they do the soil test all themselves. And leaf testing might not be something that's as commonly done by growers here. And I just wanted to advocate a little bit more for why we need to do leaf testing. Is because the soil gives you an approximate of what's available, what's there in the soil, and what's deficient. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the tree is facing, especially for varieties like Honeycrisp. It is very critical that we manage the ratio of nitrogen and potassium to calcium. And so we don't know that unless we do a leaf sample, because the soil might show that, oh, it's deficient in, say, potassium. But then if you take a leaf sample and it shows you that there's enough potassium, and so that is completely different. So you might replenish with half the rate of potassium that you normally would use. For example, if you're using 50 pounds of potassium per acre, just based on the soil test that you need to replenish on an acre basis. But if you were to do a leaf test and see that the potassium level is not so bad, and so you only need to use, say, 20 pounds per acre, and you only know that by doing a leaf test. And this is just one example. And ideally, for people doing a soil test, just want to let you know, ideally for Honeycrisp, we are looking at a ratio of potassium to calcium in the soil of about 15:1 or 20:1. If we don't have that ratio of potassium to calcium, calcium to potassium. So there's 15 times calcium as much as there's potassium, or up to 20 times as much calcium as there's potassium in the soil. We want to start with that ratio in the soil. So if you don't have that, then you have to lime your soils every year until you reach that sort of a ratio for your Honeycrisp blobs, because that's the best way that's the best use of your calcium, because you want to start with at least a 15 to 20 1 odds of calcium and potassium, or ratio, so that you have lesser bit issues in your blocks. And so please line your soil accordingly, and so that you have that calcium to potassium ratio. So that is why it is very important to do a leaf test. So a leaf test, again, if you're doing a soil test every year, a leaf test could be something that you could potentially do once every 2 years, for example, in a particular block. So you could rotate around your orchard and do some blocks 1 year and then do other blocks the next year. And the leaf test gives you the most accurate picture of the nutrient status of that particular tree. And in many ways, a leaf test can help with sort of going into the specifics of how much you need, which in many cases will save you money in terms of how much nutrients you're putting out, because you know the exact nutrient status of the tree rather than looking at the soil itself. While the soil test is still very helpful, I think the leaf test gives you more specific data to your tree. And especially if you have issues with your problem varieties like Honeycrisp, Evercrisp, and these sort of newer varieties where there's a lot of calcium-based issues, then you definitely want to do a leaf test as well. And even for Gala, it's best to do a leaf test. And usually if you're doing a soil test, it might be also good to look at the organic matter, because when you think about it, 1% organic matter gives you around 15 to 20 pounds of nitrogen a year. And so that must be included in your calculations for calculating how much nitrogen you're putting out, especially again in blocks like Honeycrisp, where you must make sure that you're not excessively fertilizing. The other thing we have noticed is this year, in general, when you have a lot of rain, like we had this past few months, you have generally more nitrogen that's going in already. into your tree. Just because there's more water, there's more nitrogen available, and that nitrogen is getting into the plant. And so you must be especially careful in these sort of wet years when thinking of fertilizing, because your trees, as you might have noticed, your trees are looking much more robust and growing a lot more than, say, they were last year. And so you make sure that you keep on with your calcium sprays that you're doing for Honeycrisp and other varieties, especially more so this year. You might even think of increasing your rates a little bit, because the tree has definitely taken in more nitrogen than it would have taken in last year, even if you had applied the same amount of nitrogen last year as compared to this year. And so you want to make sure that you have enough calcium that's available for the fruit to stop it from developing issues like bitter pit. So that's it with like leaf soil testing and your calcium sprays. I did want to mention, I'm not sure if you already mentioned it, Don, but we are starting with our ripening updates from next week. And so please keep an eye out. You'll get an email on Tuesday afternoons. And this is sampling that we're doing in 3 different counties in Adams County, in Berks County, and in Center County. And what we're going to do is to try to look at varieties that are going to ripen in the next few weeks, and then take starch measurements, take their weights, their size, color, and all of that in 2 orchards in these different regions, and give you an update, ripening update. So we're going to do these measurements on Monday, and we're going to send out the update on Tuesday so that it is more timely and usable by you. And so a whole bunch of us are doing this. Daniel and Melanie and Daniel in Adams County, Don in Berks County, and Lindsay and I in Center County. And so all of us are putting this update together. I hope that you're able to see these updates. It'll come out as email alerts on Tuesday afternoon from next week. So I just wanted to mention, put in that plug for the ripening updates as well. And do you have any other questions, Don?
No, that was really great, Sean. Thanks. I had not mentioned the harvest maturity update yet, so that was a good point. So
Yeah, that's good. The other thing I did want to quickly mention that I'm noticing in my trees as well is that this year might not be the best year for color because of how much vegetative growth we've had. And so something that you might be thinking of doing, and or you might do as a general practice as well, is summer pruning, especially in late July, early August, of some of the varieties, especially varieties in which you want to develop more color. Then I would highly advise you to do it a little bit quicker than later, just because of how much foliage that we have that's covering up the apples. And if you have not thought about it yet, I think it's a good time to think about the different various methods you can use to improve color, whether that be Extende, which is a reflective fabric, but also there are other different nutrients available that you could potentially use. We are currently doing a trial of testing out the different commercially available color products which help to improve color. And so we'll have firm recommendations from next year on which one to use, because whichever works best, that's what we will recommend. But there's a bunch of different products on the market that you could use. If there's a year where you need to use it, it's probably this year, just because of the amount of vegetative growth we've had on our trees covering up the apples, and also the heat. Both of them are negative indicators of color, meaning that when you have very high temperatures, it's kind of stops the color development. Although towards now, we are slowly noticing that temperatures are a little bit better, especially there's a very good differential between the day and nighttime temperature, which is really important for color development. And we're slowly starting to see more of that. So maybe there will be some change in the next month, but it's good to start thinking about how you can improve color, especially in your regular strains of Honeycrisp, Gala, and other varieties in which you're looking to develop more color.
yeah, no problem. I was just trying to pull up the weather to do the day and nighttime temps because it doesn't feel like it's a lot cooler, but it is about 20 degrees cooler between day and night.
It is, and I noticed that the past few days that we are seeing that differential a bit. We didn't see that differential a lot in the previous month, I think. but we're slowly starting to see that. Usually nighttime temperature 60 or below is good for color development. And so hopefully we see more of those days in the future.
Yeah, I think not this coming weekend, but the weekend after, it's projected to maybe start dropping down to around the 60s at night, which would be really
Okay.
nice.
Yeah, that would be nice.
So
I just read while Greg was chatting, I was just going through AccuWeather as far as what the forecast was for the next couple weeks. And because there's a heat dome right now over the Midwest, which apparently is related to corn sweat, which I
it is.
heard.
Yep.
And so we are getting kind of the edge of that, although it's we're going to have like a day or two that it's going to be the heat index is going to be over 100. But I think the dew point isn't going to be too terrible. So it seems that the lows are still going to be in the lower 70s as opposed to upper 70s or even 80, like how it was at the end of June when we had the heat dome over the Northeast then. But then it was saying that next week we're going to be dropping temperatures and it's going to feel like fall. So I think this will be good news for apple growers in color, especially if that comes to fruition with those really cool evenings, those
Those early
chilly evenings, I
strains
should
are
say.
going to appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And it looks like it's going to be like 60 degrees. So that's definitely going to feel like fall in the
Yeah.
evenings, I should say. So,
So, very good. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for jumping on here. Unless there's anything else, which I can't think of, we'll do another one in a couple weeks, and good luck on the start of harvest, everybody. Say
all
goodbye,
right.
everybody.
See you later. Good luck.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. And then, Sean, could you say hello real quick?